Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. My name is Ryan. For 15 years, I lived what I thought was an ideal life. Karen and I had built our world together, a cozy suburban home, a smart and spirited daughter named Lily, and a rhythm of love and laughter that seemed unshakable. At least, that's how it appeared from the outside. Inside, things were crumbling long before I noticed the cracks. Karen was the kind of person who could command a room without trying. With her quick wit and charming smile, she could weave magic in conversation, leaving anyone spellbound. I was no exception when we met in college. Her energy was intoxicating, and it swept me off my feet. We married young, built a life together, and poured everything into raising our daughter and achieving our dreams. For years, I believed we were unshakable. But something shifted about a year ago. At first, it was subtle. Karen's attention waned. She began staying late at work more frequently, attending urgent meetings on weekends, and retreating into her phone with a level of secrecy that felt unnatural. I wanted to believe her excuses. I wanted to think I was imagining the growing distance. But there was a knot in my gut that wouldn't loosen, no matter how many times I dismissed it. It was a late Thursday evening when everything changed. Karen had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion after another one of her long days at work. I sat in the living room, half watching a show and scrolling through my phone. Something felt off. I couldn't shake the tension in the air. As I walked to the bedroom, I saw her journal sitting on the nightstand, partially open. Karen wasn't usually one for journaling, so the sight of it caught me off guard. Curiosity got the better of me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that book as though it were a live wire. My better judgment told me to leave it alone, to respect her privacy. But that gnawing doubt, the same doubt that had been plaguing me for months, pushed me to open it. And so I did. The words on the page hit me like a thunderclap. She wasn't just writing about work or mundane life updates. She was writing about him. His name was Brandon, a co-worker at her firm. The details were excruciatingly vivid, descriptions of their encounters, how he made her feel, and how she looked forward to their next business trip. The journal read like a romance novel, except the main character was my wife, and the villain was the man I never knew I'd been sharing her with. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, reading entry after entry. Each one was a dagger, carving deep into the trust one had placed in her. She described the thrill of their secret rendezvous, the excitement of their stolen moments, and, worst of all, how he made her feel alive, in ways I apparently didn't. Alive? That word reverberated in my skull. I thought of the sacrifices I had made for her, the nights I had stayed up comforting her after a tough day, the way I had poured every ounce of myself into our family. Wasn't that enough? How had I failed so spectacularly that she sought something else, someone else? I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the journal in my hands. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My pulse thundered in my ears, and my vision blurred as tears threatened to spill over. I wanted to wake her up, to confront her right then and there, but something held me back. Maybe it was disbelief, or maybe it was the faint hope that there was some explanation, some way to make sense of this betrayal. Instead, I put the journal back on the nightstand, exactly as I had found it, and walked out of the room. I needed air. My hands shook as I grabbed my car keys and stepped into the cool night. The silence of the empty streets offered no solace as I drove aimlessly, trying to make sense of the storm raging in my mind. I kept replaying everything, our wedding day, the birth of our daughter, the countless moments we had shared. Was it all a lie? Had I been blind to the truth all along? Eventually, I parked in an empty lot and buried my face in my hands. Anger bubbled up, sharp and searing. But beneath the anger was pain, a deep, hollow ache that refused to let go. I thought about Lily, about the life we had built together. How could Karen risk it all for some fleeting thrill? What had I done to deserve this? By the time I returned home, the first hints of dawn were streaking across the sky. Karen was still asleep, her face peaceful and untouched by the storm she had unleashed inside me. I couldn't bring myself to wake her. Instead, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, my mind racing with questions and half-formed plans. I knew I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't ignore what I had discovered, but I also couldn't rush into confrontation. Karen had betrayed me, yes, but I wasn't going to let her blindside me any further. I needed to be strategic, to protect myself and Lily before the fallout hit. And so, I made a decision. I would find out everything, every detail, every lie, and when the time came, I would make my move. That was the moment I began taking back control. I woke up the next morning with a singular clarity I hadn't felt in years. The storm of emotions from the night before had settled into a cold, quiet resolve. I wasn't going to confront Karen, not yet. I needed to arm myself with the truth, to uncover every hidden corner of her betrayal before I decided my next move. The first step was subtle observation. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to Karen's habits, noting every inconsistency, every excuse, every moment she seemed more engaged with her phone than our conversations. She hadn't noticed the shift in me, likely too consumed by the high of her affair. I forced myself to act normal, to play the part of the oblivious husband while inside, I was cataloging every detail. Karen's work trips became the most obvious red flag. Before, they had been sporadic, maybe one every couple of months. But recently, they were almost bi-weekly, always to the same city. Brandon's there, I thought bitterly. She would leave with a lightness in her step and return looking worn out, as if the weight of her double life was catching up with her. The irony was almost poetic. I needed proof, hard evidence that would speak louder than any words. So, I turned to technology. I installed a small GPS tracker in her car and set up software on our shared laptop to monitor her email and browsing history. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, the ethical implications clawed at me. But every time I hesitated, I reminded myself of that journal, of the betrayal already in motion. Karen had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. The tracker was simple, discreet. It synced with an app on my phone, allowing me to see where she went in real time. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened, work, errands, the usual routine. But then came one of her work trips. The tracker told a different story. Instead of heading toward the airport as she claimed, Karen drove 2 hours north to a quaint hotel tucked away in the woods. My chest tightened as I watched the little dot on the map settle there for the night. She wasn't attending a conference. She was with him. I sat in the living room that evening, staring at the screen, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to jump in the car, drive to that hotel, and confront them both on the spot. But another part, the colder, more calculating part, held me back. This wasn't just about Karen's betrayal. It was about my daughter, my finances, my future. If I acted impulsively, I could jeopardize everything. So, I waited. I used the time to gather more evidence. I printed emails from her account, messages filled with flirtation and inside jokes that made my stomach churn. I saved screenshots of texts between her and Brandon, texts she foolishly synced to the laptop. Each message was like a nail in the coffin of our marriage, a reminder that the life I thought we had was gone. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. Karen still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still smiled at me across the dinner table. I played along, matching her energy with practiced ease. But inside, I was boiling. Every kind gesture felt like a lie, every shared laugh a mockery of what we once had. Lily, blissfully unaware, kept the household running with her bright spirit. For her sake, I kept my emotions in check. One evening, Karen returned from another one of her trips, her face flushed and her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. She greeted me with an uncharacteristic warmth, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that felt hollow. "I missed you," she said, her voice soft. I forced a smile. "Missed you too." It was moments like these that tested my resolve. Her ability to act as though nothing was amiss, to lie so seamlessly, filled me with equal parts rage and sadness. But I kept the anger buried, channeling it into my preparations. The time to confront her would come, and when it did, I needed to be ready. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Karen left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while she stepped outside to take a call. My heart raced as I picked it up, navigating quickly to her text messages. There they were, strings of messages between her and Brandon, discussing their next rendezvous, reminiscing about their last. One particular message made my blood run cold. "I wish I could leave it all behind and just be with you." That was it. Any lingering doubt, any hope that this was some fleeting mistake, dissolved in that moment. Karen wasn't just cheating on me. She was building a future with Brandon, a future that didn't include me. When Karen came back inside, I had already put her phone down, my face a mask of calm. She smiled at me as she walked past, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. I watched her go, knowing that the days of pretending were almost over. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I made my final preparations. I compiled all the evidence, emails, texts, GPS logs, into a folder that I could hand to my lawyer. I researched the best divorce attorneys in town, settling on one with a reputation for being ruthless in cases like mine. I wouldn't just survive this. I would come out on top. The next morning, I looked at Karen as she sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. She glanced up at me and smiled, the same smile that had once made me fall in love with her. "Big plans today?" she asked. I nodded, the corners of my mouth curving into a small, knowing smile. "Yeah. Big plans." She didn't know it yet, but her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. The morning I decided to confront Karen was like any other. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room we once shared in love and trust. Karen stirred beside me, unaware that today would mark the end of the fragile illusion we had been living. My heart was a mix of anticipation and dread. No matter how much I had prepared for this moment, the finality of it weighed heavy on me. Lily was still asleep when I made breakfast, a ritual that had become mine in recent months. The smell of coffee and eggs filled the air as Karen came down the stairs, her hair tousled and her robe tied loosely around her. She smiled at me, the same easy smile that had once lit up my world. Now, it felt like a lie, a mask she wore to keep her double life hidden. "Morning," she said, grabbing a mug from the counter. "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. The manila folder containing all the evidence sat on the dining table, waiting. My eyes flicked to it, then back to Karen. She didn't notice. Lily bounded into the room, her cheerful energy cutting through the tension I carried. "Pancakes, Dad?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "Not today, sweetheart," I said, ruffling her hair. "Eggs and toast." "Okay," she said, skipping over to Karen for a hug. My chest tightened as I watched them. For Lily's sake, I had to keep this confrontation as controlled as possible. I couldn't let my anger spill over into her world. After breakfast, Karen took Lily to her friend's house for a playdate. It was the perfect opportunity. When she returned, I was waiting for her in the living room, the folder placed conspicuously on the coffee table. Karen walked in, setting her purse on the counter. "You're back early," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Sit down," I said, my voice firm but calm. Karen froze, her eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" I gestured to the couch. "Please. Just sit." She hesitated, the first flicker of unease crossing her face. Slowly, she sat down, her hands folded in her lap. I picked up the folder and placed it in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Open it," I said. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the folder. When she flipped it open, her eyes widened. Photos of her and Brandon, screenshots of their texts, GPS logs of her trips, it was all there, laid out like a criminal dossier. She sifted through the evidence, her face growing paler with each page. "Ryan," she started, but her voice faltered. "How long?" I asked, cutting her off. My tone was even, but the weight of the question hung heavy between us. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know." "You don't know?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "You don't know how long you've been cheating on me?" Karen buried her face in her hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then how was it supposed to happen?" I demanded. "Were you planning to leave? Start a new life with Brandon?" Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with a mix of guilt and defiance. "I wasn't going to leave you," she said. "I love you, Ryan." "Love me?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what love looks like? Sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, building a fantasy with another man?" Karen wiped her tears, her hands shaking. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said coldly. "You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. Do you even understand what you've done to me? To Lily?" Her face crumpled at the mention of our daughter. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I swear, I never wanted this." "But you did hurt me," I said, my voice breaking. "You destroyed the life we built together. And for what? A cheap thrill?" Karen's tears fell freely now, but I felt no sympathy. This wasn't the time for forgiveness or reconciliation. This was the moment of truth, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her emotions. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said, my tone resolute. "I've filed for divorce. I'll be seeking full custody of Lily." Karen's head shot up, panic flashing across her face. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Ryan, please. Don't do this. We can work through this. We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You broke us the moment you decided I wasn't enough." "But I love you," she pleaded. "I'll end it with Brandon. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." "It's too late," I said, standing up. "You made your choice, Karen. Now I'm making mine." She sobbed into her hands as I walked away, leaving her alone with the folder that had shattered our marriage. My chest felt heavy, but for the first time in weeks, I also felt a sense of clarity. This was the beginning of the end, and I was ready to face whatever came next. As I stepped into my office to gather my thoughts, I could hear Karen's muffled cries from the living room. They didn't sway me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and protecting my daughter from the fallout of Karen's betrayal. I sat at my desk, staring out the window as the sun began to set. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. The weeks after our confrontation passed in a haze of legal filings, tense exchanges, and painful silences. Karen moved into a small apartment nearby, as required by the court order that allowed her supervised visitation with Lily. Our house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt hollow, its walls echoing the sounds of an unraveling life. Lily, for her part, was struggling. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she sensed the tension. "Why can't Mom come home?" she asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. "It's complicated, sweetheart," I replied, my voice heavy. "But Mom and I both love you very much. That will never change." She nodded, her innocent trust breaking my heart. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, retreating to my office where the weight of my decisions bore down on me. Karen, meanwhile, had been reaching out more frequently, begging for a chance to make amends. Each message chipped away at my resolve. The anger I once felt was fading, replaced by something more insidious, a hollow sadness, a grief for the life we had lost. One Saturday morning, Lily was playing in the backyard while I worked on my laptop in the kitchen. The sound of her laughter was a brief reprieve from the gloom that hung over my days. Then the doorbell rang. Karen stood on the porch, her eyes puffy and red. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to turn her away, to protect the fragile peace I had built. But something in her face, desperation, perhaps, made me step aside and let her in. We sat at the dining table, the same spot where I had confronted her weeks ago. Karen fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began. "I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. It wasn't about you, Ryan. It was about me, my insecurities, my need for validation. I know that doesn't excuse it, but I wanted you to know." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it hovered over mine. "I miss you," she whispered. "I miss us. I miss Lily. Please, Ryan, give me a chance to make this right. I'll do anything." For a moment, I wavered. There was a time when those words would have meant the world to me, when I would have moved heaven and earth to repair what was broken. But now, they felt hollow, like a promise made too late. "I don't know if I can," I said finally, pulling my hand away. "Too much has happened, Karen. I can't go back to the way things were." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. "I deserve this," she said between sobs. "I destroyed everything. But Ryan, I'm begging you, for Lily's sake, please don't shut me out completely." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'll think about it," I said. "But I need time. And so does Lily." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Thank you," she said quietly before leaving. That evening, I stood by the window, watching the rain as it streaked down the glass. Karen's visit had stirred emotions I thought I had buried. Could we ever rebuild what we had? Did I even want to? Lily's laughter from the living room pulled me from my thoughts. I walked in to find her watching a movie, her favorite stuffed animal clutched tightly in her arms. She looked up at me with a wide smile. "Daddy, sit with me," she said, patting the spot on the couch next to her. I sat down, wrapping an arm around her as she snuggled against me. In that moment, I felt a fleeting sense of peace, a reminder of what truly mattered. The next morning, I woke to a strange stillness in the house. Lily's room was empty, her bed neatly made. Panic gripped me as I called her name, my voice echoing through the silent halls. Then I saw it, a note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in Karen's handwriting. "Ryan, I couldn't do this anymore. I've taken Lily with me. She's safe, and I promise I'll take care of her. But I need to start over, away from everything that reminds me of my failures. Please don't come after us. This is what's best for everyone." My hands shook as I read the note again and again, disbelief turning to rage, then to despair. I called Karen's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I called the police, but they told me there was little they could do until they determined if Lily was in danger. For days, I searched, calling Karen's friends, driving to her apartment, combing through social media for any hint of where she had gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut: she had planned this, quietly and meticulously, while I was busy trying to hold everything together. Weeks turned into months, and still, there was no sign of them. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, each one a painful reminder of the family I had lost. I hired private investigators, spent sleepless nights poring over maps and flight records, but it was all in vain. The ache of Lily's absence was unbearable. Every corner of the house held a memory of her, her laughter, her drawings on the fridge, the way she'd run to me with open arms after school. Now, those memories felt like ghosts, haunting me at every turn. Years later, I received a postcard. It was postmarked from a small coastal town, the handwriting unmistakably Karen's. Ryan. Lily is thriving. She's happy and healthy, and she talks about you often. I hope one day we can find a way to heal, but for now, this is the best I can do. I'm sorry. No address, no phone number. Just a few hollow words on a piece of paper. I stared at the postcard for hours, the weight of it pressing down on me. In the end, I placed it in a box with all the other remnants of the life I had lost, a journal, a photo of Lily's first birthday, the folder of evidence that had set this all in motion. The storm that had once raged in my life had passed, but it left behind a desolate calm. Some wounds, I realized, never truly heal.